Okay, Foster Care Nation, I have one important thing to say. Yeah, we're celebrating over here. We've got Liz and Ashley as brand new members of Foster Care Nation. They've gone over to buymeacoffee.com/fostercare and helped us out a little bit. That's a virtual tip jar that we use just so people can kind of help us out. This stuff costs money, and I've got kids to be thinking about. And as you'll find out in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about college money and my struggle with a kid who wants to either go to Harvard or Yale, whichever one she decides is the best. And I've got some concerns on the financial side of that. So if you guys want to support our mission for what we do, I would love it if you guys could come over to buymeacoffee.com/fostercare. And you can come over there and either donate just a coffee for $5. God knows I need coffee. I'm tired. Or you can become a member and have a recurring subscription. And there's, I believe, a discount on there for doing a 1-year subscription. So however you want to do it, guys, we truly appreciate it. Liz and Ashley, you guys are friggin' awesome, and we love you for it. Now on to the episode. Hey there, Foster Care Nation. We wanted to open up a dialogue and talk with some of the listeners a little bit and just see what you guys have to say. We have a voicemail line. It is at 413-FOSTER3. That's 413-367-8373. Now, we would love to be able to share some of your stories. If you have a couple quick stories you want to put on the air, or if it's something you'd just like to talk to us a little bit and let us know what you're hearing and what you would like to hear, that would be awesome. We would love to have that from you guys. So if you would reach out and let us know. Also, I'm going to just assume that you guys know that we are talking about putting some of these stories on the air. So if there's some privacy issues, feel free to change a name. Don't use a name. I don't care. Just take care of the privacy stuff. We don't want anybody getting in any trouble on anything like that. We're not trying to out anybody's story out here in the world. So just be mindful of privacy. Again, that is the phone number is 413-FOSTER3. 413-367-8373. Thanks a lot, and we hope to hear from you soon. You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studios.
I signal.
Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason. And again, no Amanda today. Sorry guys, but just like it has been all too often lately, our life has gotten crazy and she is out with at least one kid today, I think. I don't know. None of them are left in the house and some of them are at school and she has others and she's doing all those good mom things that we need to get done in our life. And speaking of things we need to get done in our life, today we have Brad Baldridge with us today, and he is here to talk about something that we need to think about. Now, as foster parents, this isn't terribly deep into our concerns because most of these kids come for a short time and stay for a few months, maybe even a year or two, and then they go home. As adoptive parents, this is things we need to think about. Even as a foster parent, you can talk with some of these older kids because some of this stuff applies to them as they get a few years older. And of course, we're talking about money because we all need to talk about money. It's important. And Brad is here to talk about college money. And I don't know about the rest of you guys listening in here, but I don't have a lot of extra money laying around. And I need to figure out how to take care of that in the most important way because I have a daughter who has recently told me that she can't decide if Harvard or Yale is the one that has the better medical school. But I think she thinks that I'm going to get that all together and get it ready for her so that she can afford to go to that school. And maybe if you hear this one, I hope you're old enough to understand why I'm laughing at the idea of affording that. Brad, can you help me figure out how to get enough money together to send my daughter to Harvard or Yale?
Actually, yes, I can. But here's an interesting idea: is a lot of these crazy elite schools don't automatically assume that they're going to be expensive, because yes, they have a crazy high price tag, but for families that need help, they, again, they cost in the 80,000 range per year. But for families that need help, they can give up to $80,000 off in scholarships. So in the right situations, a lot of times the elite schools are actually a low cost option. I think the reality, though, is you got to get accepted. And that's the other challenge, where a vast majority, again, they take the top 1 or 2% of the students out there. Therefore, most families, although it would work out financially, is not going to work out academically.
Well, actually, she's a smart kid. I sometimes I don't say that enough to her, I don't think, because I assume she knows it. But the truth is she was invited to a program put on by Harvard this year as a high school freshman, to go sit in a deal, the College of Future Doctor something or other, and have a lot of speakers come in. And she's supposed to be able to sit in on a surgery at the end of the program. So for a girl who's in a small town city, we'll say it's not a town, it's just a small town. She's at the top 1% of her school. I'm pretty certain she's a pretty smart cookie. We'll have to wait and see if that works out that way for Harvard or Yale when they look at all the numbers.
For sure.
So you are, you know a lot about money, and we'll just go ahead and throw this out there because it makes everybody feel better. Financial advice is exactly that, financial advice. And you need to make certain that you have like the financial people in your life who tell you what to do. So I'm not responsible for financial advice here. Brad's not responsible for financial advice because neither one of us are your financial advisor. How about that? We don't know your personal setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. And I think that's a good advice in general, right? Is you need to understand how it applies to you. And if you don't, somebody needs to have your particular information before they can give you quality advice.
Well, yeah, because most of us take advice from somebody we know, and if you know them well enough, you know that they're broke. And why are you taking financial advice from your broke buddy? He's not a very smart guy, so at least when it comes to finances. So that's why we're talking to you today, Brad, because you are a smart guy and you know some stuff about this. So I'm just curious, when we talk about college for kids, let's just talk about the foster care thing a little bit, because before we started recording, you mentioned that you'd found a couple questions on the FAFSA that, quite frankly, the last time I filled out a FAFSA was a lot of years ago, a couple decades ago for me. And so I didn't know that was on there, or if I saw it, I didn't remember it. There's some questions about foster care experience on the FAFSA, right?
Correct. So one of the questions is, have you been involved in foster care? Were you at least 13 when you were involved in foster care? And if you answer yes, that automatically makes you an independent student. So what does that mean? Well, that means that mom and dad are not reported on your FAFSA, or your foster parents are not reported either. So if you were adopted, or if you weren't adopted, if you're just a foster child, you get to be independent, which makes it much more likely that you'll qualify for various need-based aid programs through the federal government. And if your state offers programs, probably qualify there as well.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there are a lot of opportunities out there for kids who either are currently or were previously in foster care, and we don't know about a lot of those. Where would you go to look for information like that? Do you have any ideas, like where you find that information, or is that something that just requires a good old-fashioned college try to dig in the internet?
Well, I think both, but I think another great source of information would be the colleges themselves. I think a lot of colleges out there, try and want to be helpful for families that need the help. And again, because of the foster care situation, that kind of puts you automatically in that category of families that they're looking to help. So reaching out to them and spending some time working with them. I think that's the biggest challenge with college planning in general, whether, again, across the board, is it takes a lot of time and effort, and people don't realize how much time and effort it's going to take and it's easy to put off, right? Well, I've got a 7-year-old, don't need to worry about college. I've got a 12-year-old, don't need to worry about college. I have a 15-year-old and maybe I should be worried about it, but it's still a couple of years away. And next thing you know, it's here. So I think for a lot of families, realistically, if you have a junior right now at any, again, whenever you're listening to this, if you have a junior right now and you don't have college figured out, you're behind, in my opinion. You really need to buckle down and get to work. Now, again, you may discover that it was a bit of a false alarm and it wasn't that bad. But for a lot of families, it's a really big challenge. I've helped hundreds of families, and I've never, ever had anyone tell me they started this too early. But regularly I hear I started this too late. So understanding your options and working with the colleges and understanding how federal financial aid works, I think, is a big part of any student that's been in the foster program. And then again, if they're out of the foster program and been adopted, even if they're reunited with their parents, it doesn't really matter. If the answer yes, that I've been in foster between, when you're filling out the form all the way back to age 13, you get a kind of an automatic don't have to report my parents, which can be a huge deal and provide quite a lot of federal aid, which can make a big dent in the overall cost. Of course, college is still expensive, and it's, and to talk about that, that's another big challenge of why is it expensive? Well, because they raised the prices and kids still came. That's why it's expensive. And then they raised them again and they still came. So just like anything else, why wouldn't they raise their prices, right? I mean, the cost of everything goes up if it can, and eventually, there's a limit, and you say, well, we start losing customers. But many colleges, and we're kind of there now, where colleges have started raising prices or are still raising prices, but they're also raising the scholarships that bring the prices back down. So some colleges have said, well, we raised our prices by 5%, but we also raised our scholarship by 5%. So the net price only went up at 1 or 2%.
I see.
So I think through the 90s and thousands, the prices were going up very quickly. And I think in the last 5-ish years, especially, that's slowed down a lot. Not to say, but again, it slowed down from a very high place. So it's still growing. It's growing slowly, but it's also at a relatively high price.
Okay. Well, my oldest son has a degree, and he did it the super cheap way. He followed in his old man's footsteps, and he went out to and did the Army thing for a hot minute, and he walked away with his LPN, and owes nothing for it. As a matter of fact, with what's left over from his, it's not the GI Bill anymore. I can't remember what it's called, but his college money for his time in the service in the military, he can finish his RN degree for less than $2,000, which is one way of doing it, because I don't know if you're familiar with what the cost of getting an RN degree is, but I don't think it's cheap.
Oh, no. Right. An RN would be a 4-year degree. So typically it's a 4-year college. So a typical state school, on average is about $25,000. The average private school is about $55,000. Now, the average private school also gives you an average of $20,000 off. So 55 becomes 35 on average. And again, you're not average. So you're going to be more or you're going to be less. So you can't rely on averages, especially around this, because there's a wide disparity between some situations and others. Some kids do go to the elite schools and pay full price. Some kids go to the elite schools and pay almost nothing, but they average somewhere in between, right? So, and that could be the same with the state schools, right? There's a lot of programs out there where some kids might be able to get through the state program with maybe a little bit of debt, but not, other than just taking some basic loans, they get through. Other people, are going to pay full price, and they're not going to get many grants, et cetera, et cetera. So they may come out, either the parents stepped up and paid 25 or to 50 to 100,000 on the student's behalf, or that student then has some sort of loans for that kind of money.
I see. Yep. Well, like I said, my oldest son, CJ, if that would cost him $100,000 and he pays $2,000, I'll say that was a pretty good discount for a guy spending a little bit of time in a uniform working in a VA hospital. He got life experience, he got work experience, and he got most of his college paid for. He's doing pretty well. And right now, I'm just going to tell you, even with an LPN degree, the boy is making as much money as I am in a job I've been working at 20 years, which just,
Yes.
yeah, the nursing field right now, my gosh. I mean, I can see where that degree is worth it because there's no shortage of work for nurses right now. And he kind of has his pick of where he wants to work and when. It's pretty awesome. It's worked out really good for him. It's one of the few times when he took my advice right up front. When I told him, I said, when you go talk to that recruiter, take me with you. Do not go talk to him alone, because the recruiter was trying to get him to be a rocket repairman or something like that. And I looked at Sergeant White and I said, Sergeant White, tell me, where are those rockets they're working on? Are they in the sandbox? He's like, well, yeah, primarily. I'm like, all right, boy, don't do like your old man did. Go get you a job where you can serve your country. And then at the end of it, you can be served by the military, right? Like, go do that. So that's a route for some people to take, and it works out really well for those guys. But
Right.
for some people, the military is not an option, whether it's something physical, like I probably should have been turned down because, like the doctor said when he looked at my feet, he goes, dang, son, those big old flappers ever give you trouble? That's flat as a 2x4.
Yeah.
The short answer is yes. Yes, they do now. They didn't back then, but some people aren't a candidate for that. And I'll be real honest, I don't see my daughter choosing to go off to the military to pay for school. So and she was over 13 before she was out of the foster system. She was adopted at a very young age. And so she's not going to apply or be able to apply that benefit to the FAFSA. But, for the parents out here who have adopted kids, these are our kids now, right? I've got 7 kids that I own, and most of them came to us through adoption. But I've got to figure out how to handle college as a future for some of these kids, because some of them just obviously aren't interested in college. And I think if it's not the road for you, it's not the road for you. And as parents, we kind of can see that and know some of that. But this she's going to go to school one way or another, and I'm probably going to have to pay some of it because that's my job as dad. She is a freshman in high school. So what should I be doing now to get her ready for that, to get our finances in order and figure out how to do that for her? Hey there, Foster Care Nation. We'd like to take a quick minute to step out of the podcast here and ask you guys for a little bit of support. If you could share an episode with people, friends, in a group, with family, anywhere where there's somebody who would like to hear this. Also, if you'd like to join us and support our mission, a couple dollars a month would be really helpful. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/fostercarenation. Now back to the show.
Right. So, yes, as a freshman, ideally, you need to understand that there's college planning that parents can do. There's college planning that most of the students kind of in charge of, and then there's college planning that you're going to do together. So what the students are going to do mostly by themselves, and again, you may help or have to crack the whip to get it done and that type of stuff, but theoretically, they're going to choose what kind of majors are appropriate for their life, and they're going to pick a career path, a major. They're going to try and decide what kind of college is right for them. And you're going to help, of course, and you're going to participate in that part of it. But then as parents, you're going to decide if you can afford to save and invest. You're going to decide what the family budget is. You're going to decide how much you're willing to help based on your circumstances. And I think, again, parents that have 1 or 2 children have more of a luxury to be willing to pay more than someone that has 7, right? If you say, well, I'm going to give you $10,000 a year, which won't necessarily pay for it all, but it would help pretty substantially. But you say $10,000 a year times 4 years times 7 kids, and we're talking about a really big number.
I don't like that number.
Exactly. So maybe you can't say that. And so you have to decide what fair means. I mean, again, some kids, college is the right path, and maybe you're willing to step up and do it for those kids and not as willing for others. And, again, people would say that's not fair, but some people would say, well, it's perfectly fair, to each their needs. And if they're not interested in college, then we'll help them in some other way. So I think that's part of the challenge, but understanding if you're going to qualify for need-based aid, and again, with all the foster care rules and independent student rules, it may be a lot different than you realize, because it may be based on mom and dad's assets and income and the student's assets and income, which is typical, as well as the number of students that the parents are supporting. But that's, again, the typical parent situation. if the student turns 24, if they're married, if they have dependents of their own, and again, not usually planning opportunities, right? Where you say, well, I know how we're going to play for college. Why don't you go get married? That doesn't work so well. But if it already happened, well, then by all means, you take advantage of it, right? But then, as you mentioned, being separated from active military service may make you independent. And being part of the foster programs may make you independent. So if those things happen, you need to take advantage of them, and therefore you really need to understand it. And I think that's what's holding back a lot of foster kids is it's an overwhelming process that they don't know where to start. Most, 15, 16, 17-year-olds are not going to go to a financial aid office of a college and hash it out. I think one of the biggest things that parents can do is give the support that they need and show up at those meetings and ask the right questions and help interpret what's being said. And again, because a typical 17-year-old, when you start talking about thousands of dollars, their eyes glaze over. They've never seen $1,000. They've never earned $1,000. There's no difference between $1,000, $10,000, and $100,000 for most 17-year-olds. They're all big numbers. There is no difference between $100,000, which is what an education might reasonably cost in some situations, and $10,000, which is also what an education might reasonably cost in some situations. But for a typical 17-year-old, again, there's no difference. So they could just as easily decide on the 100,000 as the 10,000 and not realize how much of a difference they're making in their life. And again, I'm not saying the 100,000 is the wrong path. As you mentioned, like nursing, right? I've seen situations where a student decides to, start at the lowest nursing degrees, which is typically a 1-year certificate or a 2-year certificate, something like that. Earn that degree part-time while working, at the hospital, doing something that doesn't even take a degree. And then when they get their lowest level nursing degree, they keep working, and then maybe the hospital pays for something. And then 8 years later, they've lived like a poor college student for 8 years. And then they finally have their RN and they're off to the races, and they don't have a lot of debt because they worked their way through it. And they worked, again, and they struggled in some ways, and it was, a lot of work. Conversely, a typical nurse out of school may get a signing bonus now, and certainly will make, $25, $35, $45 an hour kind of things, depending on where, they're working swing shift in the emergency room on a Saturday night. They're making good money. Especially if that's not their normal job, if they're just doing it for cash because they're not getting benefits, right? You're moonlighting at the emergency room. A lot of those, those types of jobs are crazy as far as benefit, cost or pay. So another path might be do what it takes to get your RN degree in the first 4 years. Continue to live like a poor college student, which is a challenge. But if you did that, you'd have substantial cash flow to pay off those loans. And you could be in the exact same place 8 years down the road. But you have to have the discipline to get through the nursing degree. And then you have to have the discipline to aggressively pay back loans and still live at home or live with 4 roommates or whatever you did and would have done in college, right? Out of necessity, when you're a poor college student, you have 3 roommates in a dumpy old house somewhere, and it's a mile walk to campus, but you can't afford a car, et cetera, et cetera. So if you did that, right, if you walked to the hospital because you can't afford a car and you had 4 roommates, but instead of walking to the college, you walked past the college and walked to the hospital, where a lot of colleges and hospitals are right next to each other, then that would work out great. And I think, but again, most people understand that logic. Once they graduate with a nursing degree and are making good money, they need a new car and they need an apartment by themselves, and they need to grow their lifestyle right up to whatever they're earning. And then that $50 or $60 or $70,000 of loans, now they stretch that, that follows them around. Then they have kids, and then, and all of a sudden they're unhappy that this debt that they didn't take care of like perhaps they could have or should have is, again, still there when they're saying, well, I got to pay for daycare, et cetera, or kids or whatever. And I'm still making student loan payments at $600 a month. It's a burden, but again, they could have been paid off, so I think what it really takes is understanding the opportunities. And again, to put some numbers around that, if you can be independent, there's, about $10,000 of federal grants that you may qualify for, and another $9,000 or $10,000 student loans that you may qualify for per year.
Back in the day when I first started driving for a living, and back when satellite radio was still a thing. I don't know if that's even exists now, if people use that still or not, but it was at the time. And when you drive all night, you need something to keep you awake. And that's where I ran across Dave Ramsey and some of the things that he talked about like that. And that whole concept of living like no one else so that later on you can live like no one else. Mm-hmm. And I pounded this stuff into my kids, and they actually thought the word Dave Ramsey was a curse word, I think, at one point in my life. But today, my son is 23 years old. He owns his own house. He owns a car that he's looking at upgrading soon, and he's got it figured out. Within, a few months, he'll have the car paid off and all of his debt except for the house. And he's pretty certain he can pay the house off in about 3 or 4 years. And, the house was a little under $200,000 when he bought it. And I'm like, dude, if you owned your house before you were 25, like, you're weird. I just want you to know that.
Exactly. And that, again, that's just an unusual way to do it, but there's nothing wrong with it. That's
because dad's looking for a loan soon.
Exactly.
But it comes back to that whole college problem where it's so expensive to go to school for so many kids. And, so for especially the parents like who have been down the same road like Amanda and I have, where we've adopted kids, we have a lot of kids. And so the college question is real. I mean, I can tell you which kids for sure don't need college right now. They need something else in their life. My second oldest son, he was never a school kid, right? He went to school, and even he ended up in the alternative school program because he was not good sitting in class and paying attention and doing his thing. And the teacher in there was actually I like the guy. He was a pretty smart dude. And he said to me once, he said, Austin is an old soul. He knows that most of what we do in high school is BS, and he's not willing to abide the BS. That's why he doesn't do well in traditional school. And today he's doing well for himself. But right now, he really wants to go out and find himself a good welding school and just go learn how to do some welding for a career. He really seems to enjoy it. Some folks on here know, and some don't. But I have a little bit of a hobby in blacksmithing. It's just what I do to kind of settle my own brain, go heat some metal and beat it around and bang it around. So I know a little bit about welding, but if I welded it, whatever you do, please God, don't step on it and treat it like it's going to be structurally sound, because I'm not skilled in that. But it's something that he's taken an interest in, and he just wants to go do that and then see what he can do with that kind of a career, which again is great money and doesn't require traditional college. And you can usually cash flow those sorts of schools if you're paying attention. But I didn't need to figure out a 4-year degree for him, how to pay for that. I knew that kid. But I know that some of the other kids I have are looking at that, and they're going to want to go down that road. And so that's really the challenge of adoptive parents, is that we look at it and go, there is something here I need to start paying attention to real soon. And I really wish that, like, from the day that Janiyah came to our house, if I had put $1,000 in the bank every month, I mean, college would be a lot easier conversation right now.
Oh, for sure. Right. And I think that's for those that have relatively young kids, I need to kind of tell you the story of what I see a lot, because I think it happened because of decisions parents made when they had young kids. And now they're kind of stuck in a tight situation. And it doesn't really matter what your income is. I've seen families earning $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 look me in the eye and say, I can't afford college. Right. And anybody that's earning 100,000 looks at someone earning 200,000 and say, well, that's crazy. Why can't you afford college? And it's the bigger garage theory, right? I don't care how big your garage is, it's full. And why is that? Because you don't consider throwing stuff out till the garage is full. So if you've got a 4-car garage and lots of toys in there and so forth, right? But you're like, okay, well, I can't get anything else in the garage. Something's going to have to go out. But we don't even think that way until it's full. It's the same with our income. If we learn how to spend it before we learn how to save it and learn how to allocate it to things that are important to us, it will go to things that aren't important to us. If we're not careful. And that's where, so I see a lot of times where there's someone earning 150,000 and saying, well, I got this big mortgage payment that we've got to make because we upgraded our house, and then we took a second mortgage to fix up the bathrooms, and all the kids are active in these expensive sports. One of them dances, one of them's involved in karate, and one of them, and all those coaches and trainings, and that's thousands of dollars a year for each one of them, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, okay, well, is college important to you? Yes. Is it tell me what's the most important things? Well, retirement and then college, or college and then retirement is what I typically hear. And I say, well, where does expensive dance class fit into that? Well, but she loves it so much. How could I possibly say no? Well, I don't know but again, when you're making decisions on all these different choices and commitments, you've kind of skipped the idea that college is expensive, and you feel like you're on the hook for that too. I have many parents tell me, I'm responsible to pay for college. It's like, okay, well then you're not acting like it. You're not really building your budget appropriately. So I think that's where a lot of decisions come in around, if you, again, commit to the big house and you continually buy, every 5 years you buy a new car and all that kind of stuff. And then you get to college and realize that, and again, sometimes we can correct where we say, all right, well, let's stop buying a new car every 3 years. That's not an economical way to have transportation. It is a convenient way, but it isn't an economical way potentially. So you can find ways to, squeeze it in sometimes. And often that's the discussion I'm having is, can we downsize? Do we have to have the lake home? Do we have to have, big vacations or small vacations? What is it that we're willing to give up? And sometimes it's relatively easy because we're going to give up some things that they kind of forgot they were paying for. I mean, how many subscriptions, managing your subscriptions, right? I've got this movie channel and that movie channel, and then Amazon, and then Netflix. And then I upgraded Netflix for a while, and then I added in AMC or whatever. There's all these different little $4 and $5 and $10 a month things that you can sign up for, then forget that they're even hitting your checking account and say, oh, gee, I haven't watched anything on that. I haven't watched the Disney Channel since the kids were 7 and 8, and they're now 10 and 12. Whoa, whoops. We could have turned that off years ago. And again, it's not huge, but all these things add up. So
yeah, you're talking about garage. Just makes me think, I had a friend of mine once say something to me. It was, if you really want to know what's important to you, just let me take a look at your calendar and your check register. Not that most people know a check register. How about your bank balance?
Right.
Your transaction sheet, right? Because, if I look in that garage and there's Harleys and Lamborghinis in there, we know what's more important to you. Full disclosure, I have a Harley in my garage. It was bought used for a reason because I love them, but 45 grand for no, that's 2 wheels is all you get for 45 grand. No, sir, I can't do that. Exactly. I can do that on a much cheaper Harley. But you look at where we spend your money, actually look at that. And the subscriptions is one of those things that we forget how much money we waste on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, and again, so it's overall budgeting, but I think the challenge for many families, especially, and I'm sure you're in this boat with 7, but when you have teenagers, not only are you dealing with what stuff costs, but you're dealing with the time element as well, where yes, I could go to the grocery store and buy the groceries there. Or I can go to the convenience store that's on my way, and I know I'm going to pay $1 more per item, but I don't care because I got to get the food and get it home and get it cooked and get it on the table before, and I forgot to buy this or we're short that. And, so we do some of things out of convenience, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we just have to be aware what we're doing out of convenience. And I think the overall budgeting and financial planning is either you got to spend the time and learn it and do it well, or find someone to help you with it, or take some courses. It's kind of like taxes, right? If there is no, well, I'm just not going to do taxes. That will come back and bite you for sure, right? So everybody's going to do their taxes. You have no choice. Okay. So then it's, well, how are you going to do it? You can learn all about how to do taxes and literally go to the library or the post office or whatever and get the old paper forms and do it by hand the old fashioned way. And if you spend a lot of time and effort and learn what you're doing, you can do that. Or you can say, well, I'm just going to go buy that software program. And there's a lot of low cost and free now as well. The government is pushing for that type of stuff. So I'm going to go use the software and get it done. Or I'm going to take it to an H&R Block. And again, there's a little bit of a risk there, right? Because it's like, well, it's the guy that's doing my taxes. Was he trained, in the last 4 weeks and he really doesn't know what he's doing, or I'm going to take it to a CPA that I know has got a degree and has taken tests and prove he knows what he's doing, et cetera, et cetera. And again, if you have simple taxes, it's probably not a risk. But when we start talking about foster care and some of these additional challenges around, that there's extra stuff that they need to understand. So is it wise to go to someone that just slams it together and doesn't really know what they're doing? Probably not, because they might miss something for you and cost you more than you save. But again, I don't know. And again, maybe that's something that your show has covered in the past, but
not really. But I can say that there was a federal adoption tax credit available that I forget the numbers because I paid somebody to do my taxes for a reason, because when we adopted the first 2 kids, I knew nothing about it and never applied for it. And by the time I found out about it and applied for the second time when we adopted the next kids, and went, holy crap, that's a huge chunk of money that I didn't have to blow. And yeah, it was too late by then to go back and redo the original ones. But finding somebody who knows what they're doing in that situation, if you have adopted a kid recently within the last couple of years, for sure, check with somebody who knows something about that adoption tax credit, because it's a big one. I was blown away how much you can actually, and rightfully so. If you think about it, especially if you're adopting kids to the foster care system, right? How expensive is it for the government to raise a kid, to take care of all that? And how good of a job do they do with things that they spend a lot of money on anyways? I won't get too deep into politics there, but let's just say I haven't seen the government being really skillful at that sort of thing in a while. But yeah, so, paying somebody who knows how to handle that stuff makes some sense to me. And that's why I take my stuff to a gal here locally who has those letters behind her name and knows how to do that, because I don't,
Right.
So, the adoption thing is big as far as tax credits go. I know. And
Right. Exactly. And the same could be said around college, is because adoption and foster care is a little bit unique. You need to potentially find those experts that can really understand your situation and help you through it, because it could make a difference. Or again, you can become the expert and do that. And I think most families and most parents are saying, well, we're busy. We're not, it used to be you could repair your own car. Well, there's too many computers in them now, and they're so packed so tightly that most people say, well, I can't get to where I need to do the work. And there's some, you need special tools, you need a computer to plug into it. It just isn't, it's beyond my capabilities now. And I think that's where, so most people don't repair their own cars anymore. It was a, common thing. You change your own oil and fix your own cars and do your own brakes and that kind of stuff. When we were kids, I remember my dad doing it. But I don't do it. And my kids, now don't learn how to work with tools because of it. And that's something I did was, shattered him a little bit and kind of learned some of the basics. But
yeah, the very first time I tried to jump start a car and couldn't find the battery because it was under the back seat. Who puts the battery for the car under the back seat? What kind of hateful people are you that you design it that way? So it took a while, and eventually took an owner's manual just to be able to figure out how to jump start this car. But
wow, I've never even heard of that. But
oh yeah,
you're right, exactly. It's like, I think that boils down to you don't know what you don't know. And I think around, taxes, it's a mature industry, and there's various levels of experts, and they exist, and you can go find them. With college, there's various levels of experts as well, but it's a new industry, so to speak. There are experts out there that will help you work with a student to figure out what to do around, what should my major be? Is tech college appropriate? Is 4-year college appropriate? Is a gap year appropriate? is apprenticeships appropriate? There's experts out there that now work with students regularly. It's their job. So they do it day in and day out, versus a parent who's saying, I've never done this before, but somehow I have to coach my kid to decide if they should go to a 2-year school or go get an apprenticeship, or maybe they should go get that 4-year degree. And it's like, I don't even know. I mean, again, another example I like to use is piano, right? If your kid came to you and said, I'd love to learn how to play the piano, and you don't, you would say, okay, well, I've got a couple of choices here. I can learn how to play the piano and then teach them how to play the piano. I can go find somebody else that knows how to play the piano and have them teach them. Maybe there's something where we can sign up for a course where they can learn online for piano. But we, again, would tend to say, well, let's go find a piano instructor or a piano class at the high school or whatever, right? I mean, there's options. You just start exploring. There's options now around college, things like gap year, and there's tutors out there to help with test prep, which is another, kind of a quicksand right now, because the testing industry and the testing process is changing quickly right now. So it's hard to know. You can go test optional, you can maybe take the test, but again, so there's test prep, there's people that help work with students to figure out what they want to be when they grow up, help them write essays, help them, if they're trying to get into competitive colleges, help them be as competitive as they can be. Special needs, if you're dealing with learning disabilities or special diets or things like that, there's experts out there that can help you find colleges that meet those needs. And then there's experts like me that help parents with again, I don't help students. If you said, well, my student's struggling with their essay, it's like, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I got a couple of people I can send you to, but you don't want me working on someone's essay. It will not add value. But I can certainly help you, figure out retirement and college. I can help you figure out, what colleges might come in at a decent price based on your particular situation.
Where do you send parents to find that kind of information? Because here's the thing is that kids who come into a foster care, they're going to have some trauma stories, and there are going to be some effects of that in their life. Kids who are adopted are most likely going to have some trauma story in their life. They're going to have some level of special needs in their life. And so when you have a parent who's talking about that, do you have resources that you tend to send people to, or do you have that on a website somewhere?
Oh, yeah. So on my website, tamingthehighcostofcollege.com, we have a podcast where I've interviewed those types of experts. So you can scroll through the podcast and literally listen to a half-hour episode and learn about, well, what do I do if I have an athlete? What if I do if I have ADHD? What do I do if I have, there's probably a podcast about it. And if there isn't, let me know and I'll go make one. So that's, I guess, one thought. The other thought is, in particular in the education industry, there are a couple of professional organizations now. There's the IEC, Independent Educational Consultant, and HECA, HECA, Higher Education Consultant Association, I think that stands for. Both of those are organizations that where people can kind of get where those types of consultants join, and then there's actually a membership search there where you can say, I want to find a consultant. And some of the, and then we got some qualifications, like this person works with special needs, this person works with international students, this person works with, so some of them have specialties and some of them are generalists, and so you can reach out to them. Obviously starting with Google and that type of thing. And I think also works, if you want to find someone local as well. But yeah, so, and then on my website as well, there's a lot of free resources, and I'm building a course and that type of thing. So there's something kind of in between, my free resources, you can upgrade to the course and then, get a little more information that way. What you may learn is, oh, this is something I can handle because the course is walking me through it. Or you might say, oh, even with the course, I'm overwhelmed. And then of course you can step up from there if you want. But I think people need to make that conscious decision of, am I going to do it? And if I am going to do it, what kind of time and commitment is it? or again, am I going to get help in some fashion?
Yeah, because the whole college thing, I've been told by many a parent, is kind of like taking on a part-time job, getting that all figured out. So that's all over at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com, right?
Correct.
And what was the name of your podcast?
Taming the High Cost of College.
That's pretty easy to find, I would think, huh?
So yes, exactly. That's
Because, well, this is the audience, the people here who are listening are the people who listen to podcasts. And if you have a kid going in that direction, I mean, I drive for a living, so I have a whole lot of time to sit out there on the road and listen to lots of things. So like I said, I've got kids with plenty of special needs. I mean, you name some of those acronyms, you know, ADHD, ADD, I've got several acronyms in my household. And so
Yep.
that's some stuff that's going to be of real use for me and people like me who struggle with these things, because, man, you know, some of them, you know, ADHD, that can be a kid's superpower, absolute superpower. It can also be the kid's downfall. And
Yes.
so depending on how you handle that as a parent, and then figuring out how to help your kids through that, because let's be honest, these kids will hopefully all outlive us.
Yes, for sure.
We're hoping they're going to make it off to college and go make a wonderful life for themselves later on in life. And it's going to be a journey for them to walk through some of those diagnoses. And the more that we can find resources now and help them now get things together so they can sit in that college classroom and learn and become someone that they're happy to be, if that's how they're wired, or if it's an apprenticeship or they become, you know, a plumber or a carpenter. Because I'm just going to tell you, I got a couple friends of mine who work in the building trades, and I don't care what anybody says right now. If you want to work in some of those, man, you'll make some really good money if carpentry is your skill set.
Absolutely. I mean, again, realistically, I think there's a shift going on in the world where 25 years ago, it was get a college education and you're instantly employable and life is going to work out perfect for you. All I got to do is get that education. Well, the challenge is so many people have gotten the college education where that isn't necessarily a differentiator anymore. A lot of businesses, however, used to use it. It's changed recently because of their having a hard time finding employees, but they used to say must have a 4-year degree, not because they felt the 4-year degree was going to teach you something that was actually applicable to the job, but it helped them narrow the candidates down, and they were pretty comfortable that, you know, again, if you just said high school graduate, well, there's a lot of high school graduates now that are really, really unqualified. They can barely read, and, you know, math is a challenge, so forth and so on. So they say must have a college degree. They just kind of upped the commitment of, okay, here's someone that had the tenacity to get the 4-year degree done. Again, they didn't expect you to learn anything in the 4-year degree that was necessarily applicable to the job you're going to do. And a lot of times they don't care what the degree is in. They just want that. They didn't get sued for discrimination by saying that. So that was, you know, and again, it limited them having to sift through and try and figure out who was actually qualified or not. Well, recently, again, with the change in the employment and what's been going on with the Great Resignation, et cetera, a lot of industries are now saying, you know, we can't put that on there. We need to get more qualified applicants, and we're going to take that person with 5 years of experience but didn't quite finish the degree or never even went to school. But if they've got experience doing the job, I think we'll say that's good enough. Where they might have gotten filtered out by the computer instantly and never even gotten on the desk because they didn't check the box for 4-year degree. So I think that's changing, and I think it's going to get more nuanced. I hope it's going to get more nuanced going forward. I hope it doesn't go back to the way it was when and if it, you know, this swings the other way. Again, because I don't think 4-year education is the perfect solution for many. It's only a great path for some.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those things we have to really pay attention to, is that while we would all love to send our kids off to college and have them go be wildly successful and all that good stuff, chances are that's not really the story for every kid. Because I went to college for a little while, and my degree is in, I didn't finish college.
Exactly.
And right. I make a really good living, you know, according to the national standards. I make a really good living doing what I do, and I make good money, and I've been able to raise many children you know.
Yes, sounds like it.
I've owned 7 and we had close to 30 come through our house over the years. So that's a lot of kids we've been able to take care of on that salary that didn't have a college. So it's important to realize that college isn't for everyone. But for those of us that have a kid who's you're like, yeah, this one needs to go to school. Like, you know, I don't care how much you know, you're not going to get to the place where my daughter wants to be. I hope without a college degree because she wants to like look at brains and stuff.
Oh, right. Exactly. And that's, I think, another thing to really think about is there's various types of degrees and various jobs and relationships, right? If you want to be a nurse, pretty much your only choice is to go get a nursing degree. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
Same with elementary education, right? If you want to be a teacher, you got to go get a teaching degree. And conversely, if you go get a teaching degree, most of the jobs you're qualified for are going to be teaching. Or you can go into those careers where they say any 4-year degree will do, or education is not required. Then there's other areas. If you want to be a rock star, well, what college do you go to? If you want to be a graphic designer, right? I mean, you've got some websites and that type of thing. If you need help with graphic design, do you care where they went to college? Or do you say, show me some of your work. Let's see if you can do what I need done. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. Show me what you can do. And if you can do it, you get the job. And there's a lot of jobs that don't exist yet, that they can't have a degree teach you. Someone's going to change careers, right? When cell phones first became a thing, lots of people changed careers to learn how to sell cell phones, to learn how to create apps for cell phones, because there was, they didn't exist. So nobody had degrees. Now you probably could go get a degree in cell phone, something or another, I'm sure, or an emphasis at a college, because they've been around long enough where that type of thing exists. But whatever the next big thing is, whether it's, again, driverless cars, someone's going to have to know how to work with those cars and fix them and maintain them and, understand work with their accidents, be a driverless car accident investigator. What degree do you need for that job? It's coming,
basket
right?
Weaving.
Right. Exactly. So there's just all kinds of different things to think about, and there's no good path. And it's one of the many things that parents have to deal with. And it is overwhelming, but it's also, I think, one of the more important things that parents at least, give their kids a little bit of a push in the right direction and, get them thinking. And for many kids, they're going to do it wrong. All right. They're going to say, I want to be this when I grow up. Then they go do that for 5 years and say, no, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. It was a place to start. And now I'm going to do a hard left turn. I did that. I mean, I have an engineering degree. I haven't done engineering work in 25 years. Now, again, working in the financial industry is a lot like engineering. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of problem solving. So the stuff I learned in engineering, I certainly apply to this day. The willingness to go learn, the willingness to say, well, I got to figure it out. If someone's going to do it, may as well be me. And that's where, and again, how do you learn how to do a podcast? Where's podcasting school? Well, there's no official degree in podcasting yet, but it's coming.
It's coming.
It's becoming more mainstream now, but you certainly don't need a degree to do that. And, those of us that did it without the degree are going to laugh at the kids that get the degree, right? We say, well, you were taken advantage of, but that's, again, looking at the bigger picture and spending your time and effort and resources where they're going to make the most impact, I think, is where many families need to just focus.
Yeah, because, honestly, I drive a truck for a living 5 days a week. And I'm going to tell you something. I am the last of the breed of guys who learned how to drive a truck with a guy who owned it sitting in the passenger seat. And you learn not to grind his gears, both metaphorically and physically, because it hurt your knuckles if you did. He was not very kind about that. And today, I don't think you can do it that way, really. It's almost impossible to do it that way. You have to go to a school, and you're going to drop a few thousand. You're going to drop some money just trying to get to a school like that. And so schools like that didn't even exist back then, really, are the norm now. And so the idea that the job you're going to set yourself up for college or for a lifetime right now may not even exist today is one of those challenges around college for a lot of kids.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a challenge too with there's a lot of kids that are very focused and they know what they want to be when they grow up. At least they think they do. So they've got a path. And that makes life so much simpler than when a student says, well, maybe I should be a teacher, but I like music. Maybe I could get involved in symphony or editing music, but I also like math. So maybe I could be a scientist. And they just bounce around. And, so sometimes it's the really smart, talented kids who are saying, I got so many talents and so many interests. Why are you making me pick one? I want to do them all. And they're struggling. And then there's the kids who really just say, I really like computer games and hanging with my friends. And do I really have to figure out what I want to be when I grow up? Can't I just stay in the basement and play games? And, it hurts to think about this. And I don't want to pick the wrong thing. And I'm getting a lot of pressure from outside forces that if I say what I really want, people, judge me for it. And, those kinds of issues as well. And I think that's a big challenge there.
Brad, there's an important question that we need to make sure we talk about before we finish this for sure. And that is, because my boys would like this answer, how do you start a gaming YouTube channel and make millions of dollars? Because that's what they plan on.
Yes. Well, it is a career path. The challenge is there's lots of people in that career path. So you got to create videos that people like better than what's out there now, right? The trendsetters, the guys that went out there and made the YouTube channel before they existed, they were the only game in town. So once you watch them because there was no choices. But as an industry matures, there's a challenge again of, okay, well, why would I switch from the guys that are already there to you? What are you going to offer? Right. I mean, and it's going to happen, right? The person that invented whatever didn't necessarily corner the market forever, right? I mean, Coca-Cola might have been first, but Pepsi came second, and lots of other choices came third, fourth, and fifth, right? So not to say Coca-Cola is bad. I mean, Coca-Cola is still there, but now we have choices and focuses and specialties and that kind of thing. So I don't know a lot about YouTube, to be honest with you, other than kids love it. And
you're supposed to have all the answers for how them to become a millionaire by playing games on YouTube. That's what they really want to know more than anything. Because I actually have a kid who seriously thought that was a career path for him. And I'm like, you might want to have a backup thought in this, right? Because yes, it has happened. You're right. It has happened. And some of those guys are wildly popular. But, I played football in the front yard as a kid. And the NFL has not handed me one red cent yet either.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Exactly. Switching from a hobby or a side hustle to a full-time career, that's a big challenge, right? I mean, there's lots of people that do podcasting on the side. There's a few that do podcasting as a living. There's lots of people that do music on the side. There's a few that do it as a side hustle, and there's even fewer that do it as a living. And
yeah, who is it? Pat Flynn? Are you familiar with Pat Flynn?
Yeah, I am SPI. Yeah, absolutely.
Pat Flynn is one of those guys, and I'm like, this dude is like a genius. He's built a freaking empire that all started from like a podcast, really. I actually started from a blog, but quickly turned into a podcast. And the dude has an empire built around that. He's a genius on how he created it. But I think so many of us are busy trying to figure out how to emulate what he did so that we can have his success instead of realizing that, the next big thing is the big thing. That's where the next guy is going to make his $1 billion empire.
Right. Well, for sure. But let's use that as an example, right? So there's the SPI podcast, and he is doing phenomenally well and making a killing. But there are podcast consultants out there, as an example, that know what they're doing, that go around and help businesses launch little niche podcasts. And those consultants make a living. Now, again, they're not making millions, but they make enough to feed their family and live comfortably. And then there's people that do podcasting on the side where they just get a supplemental income and they enjoy doing it anyway. So may as well do it. Maybe that's, and then there's someone like me who's like, well, I do podcasting, but it's directly related to my business. And, the stuff I'm talking about is what my business is about. So it's essentially advertising for me. And I pay those consultants that I just mentioned, right? When it's time to edit my podcast, I write a check. When it comes to figuring out how to set stuff up. I, write a check, I hire an intern. There's all kinds of different avenues. And I think you just need to jump in there and explore. And a lot of parents just want the quick fix, right? I want the 10 tips to solve my stuff while I'm standing here in the line at the grocery store. And I want to read those 10 tips and I want my problem to go away.
Are you kidding? We're down to, it's got to be 3 tips now and fit on a magazine cover.
Right. So, and that's where, again, figuring out what's important and forcing that to be the focus, I think both for the students and for the parents, and just understanding what you're up against is a challenge.
I appreciate your time today, Brad. That's really helpful because, like I mentioned, I have a daughter who's got me, trying to convince me to look at Harvard and Yale. So I'm gonna have to go look and find out exactly what that is here in the next year or two, so I can be scared to death for for a while as we walk this journey and try and figure out what college is actually going to cost for her. And with any luck, she will be the one that they can afford to put me in a decent retirement home someday. So, because unlike the people that you talk to, I do not necessarily have all that figured out and ready to go. So, that's something I'm kind of leaning on these 7 kids. One of them ought to at least be able to afford a decent retirement home for me when I get to that point, right?
Yeah. Or they could just divide it by 7 and they all could chip in.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of them are still teenagers, and so I'm not even having that conversation yet. Because right now they're going to research what are the retirement homes that beat the residents most regularly. That'll be be what they're looking for. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I have teenage kids. Some of them are teenagers right now, and yeah, that's just not the place where you want to have those conversations for sure. Not until they get a little older.
Oh, for sure.
Well, thank you for your time today, Brad. I really appreciate you bringing some value to our audience because, that's something we join this fraternity of adoptive parents or sometimes foster parents, and we don't usually step into it thinking about things like college. We're looking at this little kid and we want to help this little kid and we want to change their life forever. And sometimes we forget that forever means through college as well.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here, man. So we will we'll go ahead and put the landing gear down on this call, guys. If you have any questions for Brad or Brad, what is an email address where people can reach out to you at?
We can go to the website and reach me there. But Brad at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com will get to me as well. And again, there's a contact me. There's a phone number even on my website if you're so inclined. But yeah, everything is there. Just click around and do what you need to do.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll make sure all those links get on the show notes. So if you guys are listening to this in Apple Podcasts, I say this every so often, me and Apple have a love-hate relationship. I love that they put it out and there's lots of resources, but the show note links sometimes don't work on Apple Podcasts and they don't answer my emails to tell me why. So worst case scenario, if you go to our website at Foster Care Nation, you can find all the links there and I'll make sure those are active links. Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Brad. Now take his knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you'd like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have an account over at buymeacoffee.com. It's like a virtual tip jar where you can help us fund our mission for as little or as much as you want. It's at buymeacoffee.com/fostercare. The links to everything are in the show notes on your podcast player or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
you are so super awesome. I think you guys are cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Unparalleled Studios.